Welcome to the Consulting Kingdom, the ultimate podcast for business consultants who are ready to master their craft and make a meaningful impact as a kingdom business. This episode is hosted by Gleason, and it dives into powerful strategies and actionable insights that will help you grow in your consulting expertise. Through expert interviews, the Consulting Kingdom pulls from our guests their advice and equips you with the tools and knowledge and heart direction necessary to drive extraordinary results for your clients and your business. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media for exclusive content and updates. Now, get ready to unlock your consulting potential with the Consulting Kingdom.
Hey, welcome everybody to our listening audience. Today we're talking with Indy Little. He has over 2 decades of progressive experience, and he has been an amazing part of a global 25,000 person member nonprofit organization over the years. And we're going to talk about that today. So, I know you've honed your expertise, your leadership development, your organizational strategy, working with employee engagement, which is super important for a lot of our listening audience, etc. So I think you began your journey on college campuses where you initiated and led programs that engaged tens of thousands of students worldwide, which is pretty amazing. So appreciate that. And that kind of led to your laying a really strong foundation in leadership and management skills, etc. And then you came into more senior roles, etc. So anyway, welcome, and we're so glad to have you today. So tell me a little bit, how have you been?
Good, very good. Thanks for having me, Don.
No, it's so great to talk to you today a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about some of those team dynamics, leadership acuity, employee satisfaction. And I know you've got a lot of certifications and a lot of career experience in making sure. So how organizations can come together, and that alignment is so important. So anyway, great. Talk to us about your career. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah. As a young student or a young person coming out of college, I saw students and knew that if you could affect where college students were going after they graduated, you could change the world. Many people who attain college degrees go into positions of influence. And so if they could be influenced in a manner that would lead them to Christ and living for Christ, then we could see a lot of important places changed for the gospel and for the sake of the world.
Wow. So the organization you worked for was Crew, right?
That's correct.
Spent a lot of time with that. How'd you get into that? What led you to that?
Yep. As a young freshman myself in college, some folks with Crew approached me and said, basically, would you like to know God? And I said, I thought I did. And I had the opportunity to understand more about what the gospel really is and what a personal relationship looks like. And that forever changed my life.
Wow. So you've actually been pretty much an internal consultant with that Crew experience, and worked with lots of different people in lots of different areas and stuff. And I know some of your background, and I think you're a certified expert in core clarity. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah. Tell us about that. What is core clarity, and how did that play a part?
Yeah, core clarity was very influential to me as I had an opportunity to understand more about what my hardwired awesome is and what that means for how God's made me. When we looked at 139 and God says, I knit you together in your mother's womb, that's a really intentional act that God's describing. And he does that for each person. And so there's an aspect of understanding what our wiring is and then taking that and using that for his glory, for the kingdom. In the way that he's built us.
Wow. Well, so core clarity, is that part of like, I mean, I've been through a lot of, my undergrad is in psychology from
Mm-hmm.
LSU, and it's actually more than just crawfish and beer
Right.
at LSU. But I I've used a lot of instruments before, and some of them is disc, where we talk about those. We talk about Myers-Briggs. We've done a
Yep.
lot of assessments, and I had to learn
Yep.
quite a bit. But the Strength Finders piece was pretty
Mm-hmm.
impactful, where it talks about, um, the high cards, and even in, a lot of companies today will use either a Gallup model,
Yep.
and Marcus Buckingham speaks a lot about it, which is what
Mm-hmm.
your high cards are, and you
Yep.
play those high cards, and then you have
Right.
some middle cards, maybe some low. But
Mm-hmm.
I think then there's another kind of discipline, so I'm really curious of your view, where it talks about like we used to do a Praxis 360, and
Mm-hmm.
Praxis would have you interview all of your peers, your boss, yourself, etc. And that would tell you, just like it did when I was in eighth grade, you're pretty good on some of these things, but you need to focus on some of these lower things that you can't do.
Yeah.
Yet Gallup will tell you, you play your high cards,
Right.
adapt strategies to your low cards. But if you
Yep.
tried to, like for me, get my algebra grade up to, from a D to an A,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
effort that I'd have to put into that was tough. And everything else where I excelled, like in English and other things,
Yep.
dropped. So all of a sudden, my high cards are dropping just to get the effort to get that stupid algebra grade and all the rest of that stuff up to something. So how how do you reconcile those two things between, you know, the high card strengths, and how does core clarity kind of come into that?
Yep. Core clarity is definitely based on Don Clifton's original work around strength psychology. We take what he did and have the same understanding about how the talents work and
Mm-hmm.
how you turn them into strengths. Then we also have a component that helps you understand how all five of your top strengths come together to
Mm-hmm.
form a unique aspect for you. So I very much agree that every assessment has its space and it has its place. Strength psychology is definitely a different aspect than the let's make you more well-rounded. Those are very different perspectives.
Right.
And if you are a utility player and that's where you excel, then being well-rounded is part of who you are, and that can be used very well. But I would not base that as a normative space that people should try to live in.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the strengths-based approach is much more fulfilling, has a lot more impact. You can 5 and 10x your impact in whatever spaces that you swim in best, based on how you're wired and to your point of playing those high cards, so to speak.
Right. So, so it sounds like what I'm hearing too is that playing those high cards where, we are dominant, if you're an achiever or if you're one of those people that have command or control,
Yep.
or depending on what shows, when you play those cards, you're actually leading. And so, how did you
Yep.
become so successful as a consultant, even internal consultant? How did you get there?
I had a particular knack for seeing people's hardwired awesome in a way of saying, um, I'm not going to discount that right away. I'm going to ask more questions about it. I want to learn more about how, why do they do what they do? And when you begin to understand what their strengths are, what those high spaces are, what the A's on their report card is, to use another part of the analogy
Mm-hmm.
that you're using, you begin to see why they do what they do,
Right.
and you can direct that why towards spaces where they'll be successful and fulfilled and biblical. Then you begin to see both purpose and joy come together. in ways that sometimes people have never even experienced before. They didn't know that they could be joyful and experiencing purpose with their wiring because they were always trying to make up for their deficiencies.
Right. And trying to pull those low cards up to the top of the deck takes so
Takes a
much
ton of
emotional,
energy.
yeah, a lot of emotional energy, and
Yep.
and it's kind of like playing to your strengths and
Hmm.
moving towards, what makes you successful.
Yeah.
So let me ask a different question. You've worked
Hmm.
for a lot of excellent leaders. I mean, you've had some
Yeah.
people over the years, etc. So, what are some of the qualities and attributes you've most admired or tried to emulate? Um, and you know, who are some of those people that you saw, leading in that direction?
Yep. Some that come to mind are the ones that saw me trying really hard to make my deficiencies into something that would work, and for them to recognize and say, "Hey, Indy, I see you're trying really hard over here, but what would be better is if we move you over here and
Mm-hmm.
allow you to play to your strengths." And so these people were in tune with the idea that I was loyal, I was trying hard, I was putting every effort that I could, but they
Mm-hmm.
recognized that's not where he fits. And so as a younger person, hearing that from some leaders and then having them say, let's see if this over here is more in line with how you're built. And then them encouraging me in that and letting me try new things in that space and recognizing that works.
Wow. That's fabulous. And having some of those mentors and people that would speak into you, and actually, I think it takes a little bit of humility to be able to say, I
Yep.
think we want to present ourselves sometimes as consultants, especially. Oh, we're well rounded. We can do everything. We can do sales. We can do operations. We can do finance. We can do all that. But
Right.
you know, I think that well-roundedness probably served you well in decades of your career.
Hmm.
Let me ask a different question. Can you share a crisis point or a career challenge you faced? How you faced it and what happened?
Yep. There was a spot many years ago or several years ago where I was told very clearly that something that I was very passionate about and very good at was not going to be continuing in the space that I was in. And I had a very distinct decision to make of, am I going to rearrange myself to this new space and how it's going to work, or am I going to take what I know I'm good at, how I'm wired, and apply that somewhere else in the organization? It was possible I could go outside the organization too, but at that time there were still spaces in the organization that I could go to, and that was one of the most impactful, liberating moves I've ever made. And I
Wow.
found an amazing sweet spot where my job fit was about 80%, which is a remarkable job fit.
Wow. So
Mhm.
I know you're a man of faith, but how did your faith impact some of those setbacks when you were in some of those challenging situations?
Yep. Um, knowing, um, knowing that it wouldn't be forever, remembering that Moses spent 40 years, not just in the wilderness with the Israelites, but even before that, after he left Egypt for the first time, before he saw the burning bush, he was 40 years by himself. Jesus was out in the wilderness himself for 40 days. So
Mm.
there's these periods where biblically we find our characters, our historians, out in spaces where they don't necessarily want to be, and their
Right.
faith continues, or they come to a space where God meets them with a burning bush, or that period of 40 years or 40 days ends, and there's day 41 or year 41.
Yeah. So describe some of your engagements when you were working with either teams or people, or what did you do, and what do you think? What was some of the outcomes, and what happened with some of the engagements that you were as an internal consultant?
Yep. It was fascinating working one on one with people in particular because as you had a chance to just ask questions about both their strengths and some of their weaknesses, and how those things have impacted them over the years, people began to open up because now they're talking about themselves and they're talking about what essentially makes them great, focusing on the strengths. And that brings a lot of life to people. They remember these good things about themselves, or they may even remember times where those things weren't allowed. They had a boss or a parent or a caregiver that
Mm-hmm.
didn't support that piece. And so there's a little bit of lament there that you can then normalize and say, well, that's not your today. That was your yesterday. Let's see what happens when you apply it today. And how liberating that is for people is one of the most impactful things to me when you get to see some of the relief on their face to say, I can take my good and use it and go forward with this. And and then, 5 days later, 5 months later, 5 years later, to have people come back and go, that conversation that we had, or the thing that I did right after we talked, like it changed my world.
Yeah, isn't that's completely rewarding? And I'm a coach for crew and some of their senior executives. I'm on
Yep.
my fourth person 12 years later, and
Awesome.
I'm coaching a guy that's the head of gain in Canada, and just listening to his challenges. But I hate to say this, but Ted Lasso is an amazing series to watch because a
Sure.
couple of things he says in there are be curious, not
Hmm.
judgmental, right? I mean,
Yep.
comes through really strong. And don't judge people on their weakest moments
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
they can recover from those.
They
And,
sure can.
you know, so we see a lot of that in those. So here's a question.
Hmm.
What are some of the skills or attributes or talents you'd advise someone to continue to develop, whatever stage they're in? Because we have some people that are senior executives or they're moving from corporate America into consulting and they're doing that. But what are some of the skills that you think somebody should continue to really work on to equip them for today's changing marketplace? Marketplace is changing all the time. So,
Hmm.
what's your counsel on that?
Curiosity is the first thing that comes to mind. Continue to be curious. You're not going to be able to embrace every new thing, but having an understanding of what's out there and then moving towards the things that you think are going to enhance your professional career is certainly helpful. Um, Having people that are not like you in your sphere of influence to challenge you and say, what I see is, and they share their perspective, and it's probably going to be very different than yours. And so that gives you an opportunity to reflect and think, do do I want to stay where I'm at, or do I need more information in order to expand my scope and be more understanding of what other people are experiencing?
Right. It's a diverse workforce and it is changing. One of the things that I've been reading a little bit was Will Guadara's book on unreasonable hospitality, is what he called it. But it's
Hmm.
basically the remarkable power of giving people more than they expect. So when
Yep.
you're engaging with your teams and your people and your teaching, you're bringing more than they ever thought they would do, and that's life changing. To equip them,
Yep.
to be able to work in the marketplace and to do that. So tell me a little bit about what part of your career and some of the things you've done has given you probably the most accomplishment or fulfillment for you personally.
I think um, as a younger missionary, it was definitely taking students on leadership trips or mission trips and inviting them to do things they've never done before, sharing their faith, um, leading Bible studies, teaching and training them to be equipped to lead their ministries back on their campuses, and watching them go, I'm already here. This is what I'm here for. I'm here to learn this stuff, and watching them step into it and seeing bulbs come on and watching the giants fall and seeing them come into a new level of faith that they hadn't had before. That was really thrilling as a younger missionary. In my later years, it was coaching our missionaries to um, to how would I put that? It going back to engaging with those high cards in a way that says, I'm not going to be able to be awesome at everything, and it's good for me to have these things that I am awesome at, because that's how God's wired me. And there are other people on this team, in this ministry, in my life, that are good at other things that I'm not. And so together we can bring our awesome in a unified space, like the body of Christ, all these different parts of the body, right? The ear, the eye, the nose, the pancreas, the white blood cells, and we can all do our part, and then keep this thing rolling forward, and have it be an alive organism that works.
That's right. And, the team aspect of that is really powerful, because surrounding yourself with people that aren't, a lot of times I think we try and select and do people that agree with us and go the same path. But there are some people that are, if we're selfless, we go, my gosh, they are so detail oriented and so,
Yep.
So who's the most important person in a restaurant operation? Well, it depends on who you ask, because when I'm reading, Unreasonable Hospitality from Guadara, he's saying that, the chef thinks he's the be-all, end-all, because it's about the food. And the food
Right.
is the most important thing. And that's why they come to our restaurant, because the food is so amazing and the dishes are great. But then you go to the front of the house, and it's the GM and the hostess and the servers that are interacting with the guests that, they think they're the most important, because we know those customers' names. They come back and we talk to them and we engage them and we give them a great experience. But those two actually don't actually work together between the back of the house, front of the house. So one of the things that I think is your superpower, and what I've heard you talk about, is being able to blend both of those so that they understand what they bring to the table through core clarity and strength finders, so that the chefs realize that if people didn't deliver brilliant service, who cares what the food is? If they deliver brilliant service and the food is really marginal. When I worked for Famous Dave, and he always said every restaurant has to have dishes on the menu that are totally craveable. So think about a restaurant that you were in, or a place that you worked or went to, and you almost always ordered the same thing because, oh my gosh, this is so good. I just love this. And you want to take people there. And I think I did that with P.F. Chang's. I think I ate their hot fish dish like 25 times before I ever ventured off the menu, because it was just so good. It was just so craveable. And it's trying to blend that level of service detail and appreciating what a chef brings and who can cook and do, and all the prep people. But the most important person in that restaurant sometimes is this guy who is the lowest paid person. And you know what he does? He cleans out the grease trap. Guess what happens if he doesn't do his job well and clean out the grease traps? A, kitchen fire. A, food service violations, and the restaurant gets shut down. So who's more important? The guy cleaning the grease traps or everybody else? So everybody has a role to play, and I think that's one of the things that always impressed me about you is the ability to blend that team together so that they appreciate that guy. And he's actually celebrated. And he's not just like the lowest guy in the totem pole because he cleans out the grease traps. But if he didn't, that whole place would be shut down. So,
Yep.
yeah, that makes
That was
sense.
one of the about having teams together and letting them hear that about each other. Because I could highlight that from a neutral space to say this person is probably really good at X, Y, Z, and they light up and go, yeah, I am pretty good at that. Like that's something that God has made me for. And the rest of the team just heard that, and the rest of the team goes, I have noticed that about them, but I hadn't really like put it together, and now I can celebrate it because it's kind of been shared out loud. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, it's
Yep.
almost like you give them permission to celebrate the best about each other.
And and the guy that is at the bottom, he's doing his job well. He shows up. He's in good spirits. He takes care of stuff and
Yeah.
does it with acumen. And every position on that, whether you're running food or you're doing whatever, or in a hotel, the way you check people in, you do stuff, it makes a huge difference. So,
Yep.
so I have another question. What
Sure.
books or seminars or what are you reading or what have you gained a little insight from recently?
Yeah. It's a great question. Um, I think Creating the Impossible by Michael Neal has been help kind of loose some of the mental chains on what's possible. Understanding that we often set ourselves back or say we can't do
Mm-hmm.
something. And which has given me some different ways to um, relax and let some things go and step into the flow when it's there. That's been one of the most recent ones that I've
Yeah,
stepped in.
so tell us again what the author's name is and what's the name of the book?
Michael Neal, and it's called Creating the Impossible.
Creating the Impossible. I like that. Um,
Okay.
I think that's because self-limiting beliefs
Yep.
sometimes are the things that, set us back. And as consultants, sometimes we put out there, hey, we're going to help you go from X to Y by when. And we've got a
Mm-hmm.
wicked smart software that you know about, Kingdom Growth Engine. And it
Yep.
really
Love it.
helps show people what those little small increments can do. But when we put
Yep.
in what our fee is or what our retainer is going to be or
Mhm.
percentage, we think, man, am I worth that? And the reality is, it's the proof of the pudding. It's what the result is at the other
Mm-hmm.
end, at where
Mm-hmm.
they go. And so I don't know why, and my wife says this to me a bunch. She goes, oh my gosh, you wrote a blog and you did this, and you got 10 people that said, this is fantastic. Because I took Will Guidara's Unreasonable Hospitality and I wrote a blog about unreasonable consulting. What would that be like?
Yeah.
What would that be? Giving people way more than they expect. And when people read it, or some of my ex-clients got it, they go, "Oh yeah, this is so solid. This is good." But if
Mm-hmm.
one person says anything negative, or I get one, kind of I focus on that and I obsess over it, and I got 10 to 1. But for some reason, that sticks. And so just letting those things go. Again, back to Ted Lasso. He says, be a goldfish, which has a 10-second memory.
Okay.
So don't obsess on those. Just
Yep.
10 seconds and it's gone. Forget it. And just keep
Yep.
doing what you do and the way you're wired, etc. So I
One
think
of,
that's
one of the greatest pieces of advice for most salespeople, because most people are set back by a no or a difficult situation, is to go out and try to get 20 no's or 50 no's or 100 no's. Set the bar, and you're actually trying to get no's. You're trying to tally a certain number of no's before you stop. In that process, it actually makes the no less difficult to handle because you're
yeah.
expecting it. You're trying to get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I had one of the guys that started Young Life with
Mm-hmm.
Jim Rayburn years ago. He was one of the 5 originals. I actually had the privilege of working for him. He was a pastor, and he asked me to be a youth guy, and I thought he left Young Life, and I thought, well, it won't hurt me to spend some time with Roy Revere. So, and he was one of the instruments that started Windy Gap, and he's a legend. But one of the things he told me, he said, I went into a restaurant one day, and the server, she was having a bad day. She was almost in tears. She was, really down. And he looked at her when she was pouring the coffee, and he said, honey, is today a hard day? And she's, yeah. And he goes, let me guess. You had some really good people, probably, but you had a couple people that were really not nice to you, or stiffed you on the tip, or made some, bad comment. And she said, yeah. He goes, good. I can fix that. She looked at him and said, what? She goes, yeah, give me your pad that she writes the orders on. And the back of it was cardboard. And he drew a line down the center and a T, and he said, nice people on the left. And then he wrote on the other side, SOBs.
Yep.
And he drew the line. And he said, I'm going to come back here. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. And, when I'm coming back through this town on one of our meetings, but I want to talk to you. And I just want you to log each category.
Okay.
Okay? So 2 weeks later, he comes in, and this girl is just lit up. And she just sees him come through the door. She goes, you know what was going to happen. You knew what it was about. You knew what was going to happen. And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. Show me. And she flips her pad over, and she goes, oh my gosh. On the left-hand column, I've got all these really nice people, and then I've got this list of what I call SOBs. And the nice people always outstrip the SOBs. In fact, I can't wait for the end of the week because I'm looking for those SOBs so I can add a few more to my column. But, it's the way you approach it. So it's really interesting. Well, Indy, it's great to talk to you and learn a little bit about what you're doing and core clarity and all the rest. But if someone wants to connect with you or perhaps work with you or do a session or things, because you are a master at blending teams, doing and using the assessments and using the tools so that people understand, what's the best way for somebody to connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me via email at Indy, I-N-D-Y, at resonatetoday.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Indy Paul Little.
Okay. Well, they can find you there and connect with you. And, man, if anybody out there in our listening audience needs to, talk to Indy because, he's amazing at what he's able to do with people. So this has been fabulous.
Thanks,
so
Bill.
good to talk to you, and have a great rest of the week.
You too. Thank you so much.
All right. God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Consulting Kingdom. You've discovered valuable insights and strategies to enhance your consulting practice and to make a meaningful kingdom impact in your corner of the world. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us to reach more consultants like you. To experience the Kingdom Growth Engine software firsthand and to stay connected, follow us on social media and visit our website at kingdomgrowthengine.com. Until next time, continue practicing your consulting skills, offer your assistance generously, bring value wherever you go, and serve with the heart of a king. Cheers!